My daughter's voice cut through the room like a blade. "We're not your servants, Mom." I stood frozen, my heart pounding the pain in my healing knee, nothing compared to the sting of her words. But instead of breaking, I quietly picked up my cane, steadied myself, and began a plan they never expected. This was only the first crack in a storm that would turn my silence into the sharpest weapon I had. Before I continue the story, please subscribe to the channel and leave a comment letting me know where you're watching from. I woke to the throb inside my right knee and the thin blue light edging the blinds. 1 week after surgery, the house held its breath. My walker waited where Selene left it, just out of reach by the dresser, as if independence were a prize I hadn't earned. The pill bottle sat on the nightstand, smug behind a child-proof cap. I pinched and pressed. It slipped, clacked, then vanished, a bright white cylinder, rolling into the dark beneath the bed. My heart did that small, ashamed flutter. No one wants to crawl at 68. I lowered myself anyway. Carpet fibers scratched my palms. The scar tugged like a zipper. I flattened my cheek to the cool floor and reached fingertips, combing dust and a lone earring back. The bottle ticked farther away with the stubbornness of a marble on a slanted board. I eased forward inch by inch, breath, counting like I used to count compressions in the old first aid classes. From the hallway, a laugh rose and fell, Selene's light, and practiced then, Derek's low reply. My name didn't float with it, just the soft beat of a playlist and a clink of glass. I touched plastic, at last hooked it with 2 fingers and drew it toward me. The victory felt smaller than the ache spreading up my thigh. I pushed onto an elbow and fumbled for my phone. The screen lit my palm, 2 missed alarms I had slept through, little red badges like reprimands. I tapped Selene's name. In the living room, my ringtone began its gentle bell, the one we picked together the day she got engaged. Through the wall, the bell trilled, once, twice, then cut. Silence thick as the Houston humidity after rain. I called again. The bell started and stopped, as if my need were a mosquito she could swat. I listened harder, straining for footsteps on the stairs, for the particular creak on the 5th riser. Nothing. I pictured her glance at the screen, Mom calling, and her thumb moving to decline while Derek refilled her glass. It is a small thing, that thumb. Smaller than a promise, bigger than a bruise. I set the phone down slowly so it would not sound like a plea. The house swallowed the gesture anyway. Memory works like an attic fan, pulls the warm air of the past through every room. I saw a younger Selena, damp hair under a graduation cap, my checkbook open on my lap in a metal folding chair. I saw Derek at 24, proud behind the wheel of a dentless sedan I co-signed for promising he'd handle the insurance. I saw boxes I paid to move deposits, I covered holidays, I hosted recipes she swore tasted better when I made them. None of that asks for applause. Love is not an invoice. Still, as I held the rescued bottle, I felt the strange math of family totals, how easily kindness becomes invisible once it hardens into the walls that shelter everyone else. I backed against the wall and sat legs straight, the bottle warm now in my hand from the crawl. The air conditioner hummed. A neighbor's dog barked twice and gave up. Upstairs, people usually come when you fall quiet long enough. Tonight, quiet had no magnet. The staircase waited like a decision I didn't wish to make. I read the label, counted hours, twisted the cap with careful stubbornness until it clicked. A single tablet in my palm looked like a moon chip. I swallowed it dry. In the stillness, after I listened to the house the way I used to listen to sick infants for any change in rhythm that meant I should move, that I was needed. No rhythm changed. The song downstairs drifted into something upbeat, and someone cheered in a television crowd. I told myself they were tired. Everyone's tired after a week of errands and ice packs and late-night pill charts. Maybe I had called at a bad moment. Maybe the laughter was a way to shake off worry. I have a lifetime of maybes, each one a soft blanket thrown over a sharp edge. But the blanket slid tonight. Under it, I felt the hard outline of intention, how neatly the walker had been parked out of reach, how quickly the call had been turned to air. I tucked my chin, drew a slow breath, and promised myself I would not beg. Need is not the same as helplessness. Still, I could not rise without help. So I waited, counting breaths again the way I did for Patience and for my daughter when she was small. Somewhere between breath 20 and 30, a new thought arrived. This wasn't a bad night. It was a message, and I was finally learning to read it. The ceiling fan sketched slow ovals across the plaster, and my eyes followed them the way you trace the rim of a glass to keep from saying something you'll regret. On the dresser, a school portrait of Celine in 2nd grade leaned in a cheap frame, the corner mended with tape. Her front teeth were missing her grin, fearless. I used to tuck notes in her lunchbox that said, "Be brave, be kind." I wondered when bravery turned in her mind into hardness. Downstairs, chairs scraped and silverware chimed. Derek's voice floated up in a confident murmur, the tone men use when they are explaining how simple a thing is. My name didn't appear in that explanation either. I waited for the staircase to confess a footstep for the door frame to gather her silhouette. Nothing. The bottle eased the edge of pain enough to let a wider ache make itself known. I thought of how nurses teach pain scales, ask for a number, as if our nervous systems were tidy ledgers. Tonight mine refused to be pinned to any number. It moved and flickered like heat over asphalt. I closed my eyes and measured seconds instead. At 30, the music skipped. At 40, laughter resumed. At 50, a delivery truck rumbled past and left the street quiet again. If the past is a ledger, and love is not an invoice, then respect must be the interest that accumulates, or the debt that grows when payments stop. I pressed my palm to the scar through the blanket and decided that in the morning I would move the walker myself inch by inch if I had to. I could ask for help without apologizing. I could also hear what the silence was telling me. Both things could be true at once, and I could carry them even up a staircase. I let the quiet answer for them, and the ceiling fan kept time for my patience. Now. The next evening, I gathered enough strength to leave the bed. Each step down the staircase was a war between bone and steel, my hand gripping the walker until my wrist ached. The house seemed foreign, every creak of the banister reminding me of how fragile I had become. My daughter's laughter drifted upward, colliding with Derek's deeper tone. For a moment, I allowed myself to believe I might join them, maybe even hear a kind word. Instead, as my foot touched the last step, Celine turned. Her eyes narrowed, her jaw set. The warmth I once knew had gone missing, replaced by something jagged. Her voice sliced through the air like glass. "We're not your servants." The words landed with more force than the surgery ever had. I stopped moving. My balance caught between shock and disbelief. My daughter, my only child, had weaponized her tongue against me. Humiliation burned hotter than the pain in my knee. For a second, I wished I could vanish into the wallpaper, invisible to her disdain. Before I could draw breath, Derek leaned against the wall with that smug grin he wore whenever he thought he was right. He folded his arms, tilted his head, and added fuel to Celine's fire. "Stop milking us for sympathy." Through the open window, I could hear the faint chatter of neighbors watering their lawns, their voices blending with the soft hum of Houston's evening traffic. My private shame was no longer private. Their words didn't just pierce me, they echoed out into the night like a verdict overheard. My cheeks flushed, not from pain, but from the raw sting of public humiliation. I wanted to shout back to remind them of the sacrifices carved into my hands and my bank account. But my lips pressed together until they hurt. I refused to give them the pleasure of seeing me crumble. I tightened my grip on the walker knuckles, turning pale. My silence became a shield sharper than any retort. They waited, expecting a reaction. None came. I turned my back slowly, each step up the staircase heavier than the last. Their voices followed me, not in concern, but in ridicule, fading into muffled echoes as I closed the door to my room. Alone again, I sank into the chair by the bed. The humiliation replayed itself louder than before. How could my own daughter, The same child I once rocked through fevers and heartbreaks look at me and see a burden. How could Derek, whose first car loan I signed, sneer at my weakness as though it were a crime? I pressed my hands against my scar, the physical wound, but it was the deeper cut, the betrayal, that throbbed the loudest. Yet beneath the anguish, something shifted. Their cruelty lit a fire I hadn't felt in years. This was not a wound to collapse under. It was a lesson, a warning. I would not remain their victim forever. Later that night, I sat by the bedroom window. The city lights flickered across the skyline, stubborn against the darkness. I whispered words no one else would hear. They've taken my dignity tonight, but I still have tomorrow. What they mistook for defeat was only the silence before the storm. I closed the bedroom door behind me, pressing it shut with the flat of my hand until the latch clicked. The thin wood did nothing to block out the laughter that still floated up from the living room, but it gave me the illusion of safety. My chest heaved with the climb upstairs, my knee screaming against every step I had taken. Leaning on my walker, I stood in the dim room and waited for my heartbeat to slow. Tears welled up, pressing against my lashes, but I refused to let them fall. I had already given away too much tonight, my dignity, my voice. They would not take my tears as well. The silence of the bedroom was a different kind of cruelty, but it also became a mirror. In it, I could hear the echo of Selini's sharp tone, Derek's smirk curling into words that sliced through me. My lips trembled, and before I knew it, I whispered into the emptiness, "I'm sorry." The words sounded foreign, pathetic. Sorry for what? For needing help after they had agreed to take me in, for being a mother who had sacrificed every ounce of herself. The apology drifted into the still air and vanished. Then something shifted inside me. That apology would be my last, not because I had nothing to be sorry for, but because I had finally realized I owed them nothing more. I turned toward the dresser, the mirror catching my reflection in the low light. I studied the lines around my eyes, deeper than I remembered the silver threads of my hair pulled back loosely. For a moment, I saw only fatigue, the marks of age and illness. But then beneath the weariness, I saw something else. There was steel behind my gaze, an ember glowing where I thought the fire had gone out. Twist S6, my mirror, gave me back not a victim, but a woman who had endured and would endure again. It startled me how much I had mistaken quiet for weakness, when in fact quiet could be sharpened into resolve. My hands gripped the edge of the dresser as another memory broke through, uninvited yet clarifying. Nights in the hospital when I worked double shifts as a nurse, stitching wounds and checking charts under fluorescent light, then going home to count the tips of my overtime. Every extra dollar was folded carefully into envelopes for Selina's tuition. I remembered Derek's grin when he drove off in the car I helped him finance, promising he would take care of Celine, that she would never want for anything. I remembered how many times I held my tongue when I wanted to defend myself, choosing peace over pride. All those moments felt like silent investments, and now I could see the truth. Silence without boundaries becomes permission for cruelty. I sank into the chair by the window, the pill bottle still in reach on the table. The night pressed against the glass. Houston's skyline, a scattered necklace of lights in the distance. My body ached, but my spirit shifted. I spoke into the dark, not to them, not even to God, but to myself. Silence will be my shield, not my prison. Those words tasted strong, like medicine I had denied myself for too long. I wasn't yet ready to fight them openly, but I had made a vow. My silence would no longer be surrender. It would be strategy. I didn't know then how soon I would be tested, how sharp my quiet strength would have to become. But as the night deepened and the house fell still, I felt a pulse of certainty. Something inside me had awakened, and once awake, it could not be put back to sleep. I didn't know then, but the silence I chose would soon become my sharpest weapon. Morning light seeped through the blinds, a thin ribbon of gold across the carpet. My knee throbbed with the dull persistence of a clock I couldn't turn off, but I refused to start the day with groans. The walker stood faithfully beside the bed, its rubber tips scuffed from too many short journeys. On the nightstand lay a notepad and pen relics of my years as a nurse, when order and record-keeping were second nature. I drew the pad onto my lap and wrote 3 words across the top, what I still control: my accounts, my name on the deed, my memory. The list steadied me. I would not shout downstairs or beg for civility. I would document, calculate, and act. Breathing deeply, I picked up the phone. My hand trembled only once before I pressed the bank's number. Houston First Federal. How may I help you today? This is Marjorie Hale, I answered, voice firm. I need to review my accounts and make changes to all access permissions. The banker's tone was courteous professional. A series of questions followed my social security number, my last 3 deposits, the street where I grew up. Each answer rolled off my tongue with precision, the language of verification. At last, the words I had been waiting for: "Yes, Mrs. Hale. We've confirmed your identity. Then remove all proxies. Freeze joint access. No online or phone changes without my in-person authorization." "Yes, ma'am. That can be done immediately." A vibration on the nightstand text. Confirmations followed by emails. The accounts were sealed. What once was porous had turned to steel in a matter of minutes. I requested a full statement history for the past 2 years. The banker promised delivery within the hour. My thanks were brief, my tone clipped. There was no satisfaction in the call, only necessity, a correction long overdue. When the email arrived, I opened it at my desk in the corner of the room phone, propped against a stack of unpaid magazines. Rows of transactions stared back at me. Line after line, I highlighted recurring transfers labeled as household upgrades. The names of boutiques, salons, and membership clubs scrolled endlessly. Each charge unlocked a memory: the time I covered Celine's late tuition check, the summer Derek needed a loan for his first car, the holidays when I bought more gifts than I could afford. Every hour on the hospital ward, every patient's wound I cleaned, every night shift endured. They had all been translated into these expenses. My sacrifices were dressed up as their indulgences. Then the lies gleamed in bold print. Spa packages under glossy names I had never heard of, jewelry stores I had never set foot in, a private club that would never welcome someone like me. Twist S8 here were the pretty lies of luxury bought not with their sweat, but with mine. I scrolled slowly, screenshots taken one by one. Each was annotated with the calm precision of a nurse, charting vitals data mount vendor. I created a secure folder and titled it with quiet satisfaction, "For Counsel." There were no tears, only receipts. By late morning, I composed an email concise and direct. Subject: action items. The attachments lined the bottom of the screen proof of their betrayal, stitched together like a quilt of numbers. My attorney would receive it within minutes. Closing the phone, I laid it face down beside the walker. The house remained still, a deceptive calm. But the balance of power had already shifted. They believed me cornered, too frail to resist. They had forgotten that silence can sharpen into strategy, and strategy into consequence. By sundown, the first transaction declined would echo through their perfect plans, and I would be waiting with every printed page. From upstairs, I could hear their laughter float up like smoke, thick and careless. Celine's voice carried louder than Derek's practiced, in the way of someone who always wanted to be overheard. I sat on the edge of my bed with my phone in hand, scrolling through fresh alerts from the bank. Each message confirmed what I already knew: access revoked, joint cards, frozen, control restored. I rested the phone on my lap and breathed slowly. Tonight, I told myself the trap would spring. I would not run down there shouting or make a scene for their friends. I would wait. The silence would do the work for me. The first crack arrived sooner than expected. Through the thin floorboards, Celine's tone shifted. She'd been mid-laughter when it cut short into a sharp, "What a pause," then again. "What do you mean?" Declined. I leaned closer to the railing in the hallway, listening. Downstairs, She was trying to pay for another indulgence, some glossy luxury delivered to the doorstep. The card had been refused. I could picture the blush rising on her cheekbones as she tried again. Derek offered his, but the same mechanical voice chimed back, declined. The living room hushed. Their friends, 3 couples from Derek's office, sat awkwardly on the couch, drinks half raised. The moment stretched embarrassing in its clarity. For once, the performance faltered. Celine hissed under her breath. "This has to be a mistake." I smiled without joy. No, it was no mistake. It was the first echo of consequence. I took my time coming down the stairs, each step deliberate with the walker. The laughter had drained away. The air was taut, waiting. When I reached the living room, folder in hand, every pair of eyes turned toward me. Without a word, I placed the folder on the coffee table and opened it. Receipts spilled across the wood like fallen leaves, spa packages, jewelry installments, club dues. Each page a shard of truth. And then, with one firm motion, I slammed the stack flat. The sound cut through the room sharper than any insult. Celine's mouth dropped open. Derek shifted, trying to mask his shock with a smirk, but his hand clenched at his side. Their friends leaned forward, catching glimpses of the glossy names of places I had never entered, but had unknowingly paid for. "What are you doing?" Celine spat, her voice thin and trembling. Reclaiming what is mine, I said, steady as stone. No yelling, no theatrics, only proof. The silence that followed was heavy. Derek's jaw tightened, but with an audience present, he could not lash out. Celine's eyes burned into me, but she too was cornered by her own humiliation. For once my weakness was not the spectacle. Theirs was. I gathered the folder again, tucking it under my arm, and turned back toward the stairs. Each step upward felt lighter than the one before. Their whispers trailed behind me, frantic and hushed. In my room, I sat again by the window, the Houston skyline flickering in the distance. "This is only the beginning," I murmured to myself. The house below was restless, but my silence tonight was the sharpest cut I had ever given. They thought freezing my accounts was petty revenge, but they hadn't seen the evidence I had been keeping for decades. The morning sun seeped through the blinds, a pale yellow that did little to warm the air of this house. I sat upright in my bed, the folder of receipts still tucked away in the drawer beside me. My knee throbbed swollen and uncooperative, but the greater ache pressed behind my ribs. The house was unusually quiet, not a word or footstep from downstairs. Silence, the kind that isn't peace, but punishment. They avoided me now, Celine and Derek, as though I were some unwanted tenant instead of the woman who once built this home. I tried to steady my breathing, but each exhale was ragged. Last night's confrontation had left me drained, and though I had won a round, the battle had carved something out of me. This place, my own house, felt hostile. A knock startled me, soft, deliberate. I reached for my walker and made my way to the door. When I opened it, there stood Vivian. Her gray hair was swept into a bun, her arms filled with grocery bags, her eyes steady on mine. She didn't wait for permission. She set the bags down and stepped forward, pulling me into her embrace. My breath caught in my throat. "You're safe now," she whispered, her voice firm but kind. The words cracked the dam I had built inside me. I let out a breath that turned into a sob, tears spilling hot down my cheeks. For days I had refused to cry, even when my own daughter cut me down. But with Vivian's arms around me, I allowed it. I clung to her like a drowning woman, finally finding shore. We moved inside together. She began unpacking the groceries onto my small kitchen counter, fresh fruit, soup, tea. Her movements were practical, efficient. As she worked, she slid her badge onto the table, the plastic catching the sunlight. I stared at it. The familiar hospital emblem glimmered in the light, her name neatly printed beneath. That badge had been with her through decades of night shifts and long mornings carrying not only authority, but proof of compassion. Seeing it there filled me with something I had almost forgotten, reassurance. I still had allies, people with credibility, people society listened to. My daughter might dismiss my pain. Derek might mock my frailty, but they could not erase the truth Vivian represented. She noticed me looking. "This badge doesn't retire," she said softly. "It still opens doors, and so do I." We sat at the table together, the smell of coffee between us. Vivian's voice dropped lower, firmer. "You cannot stay in this house, not when it feels like an enemy camp. You need air safety distance," I wanted to argue. Pride told me I shouldn't leave my own home, but before I could answer, she reached into her purse and pulled out a silver key. She placed it gently in my palm. "Midtown," she said. "My townhouse. I keep a spare room ready. You'll have your own space, your own lock, your own peace." The key was warm against my skin, though I knew it had just come from her bag. Warm because of what it meant. A door waiting to open. A place where silence would mean rest, not rejection. I held it, staring at its simple teeth and smooth surface, and for the first time in weeks I felt relief loosen my chest. Gratitude welled in me, not loud or showy, but steady, like water, filling a dry well. I closed my eyes and whispered a vow, not to Vivian, not even to myself, but to the life I still had left. I will not crumble. I will rebuild. The sunlight filtered through the kitchen window, glinting off the key, as if sealing the promise. But even as Vivian gave me shelter, Celine and Derek were already plotting to strip me of more than just money they wanted, my very voice silenced. The morning light crept across the tiles as I reached for Vivian's spare key on my nightstand. My hand trembled from the dull ache in my knee, and the key slipped from my grasp. It hit the tile floor with a sharp crack. The plastic fob split clean in two, and the metal itself skidded several feet away, scraping against the baseboard. For a moment, I froze, staring at the broken tag, at the way even something meant to symbolize safety had fractured. My chest tightened. I bent, carefully picked it up, and whispered to myself, "Not yet broken." The key still worked, but the fragile reminder stayed with me. Even hope could crack if I wasn't careful. By mid-morning, the phone rang. The caller ID showed the hospital's administration office. I answered, steadying my voice, though my pulse surged. The woman on the line explained in clipped tones, "Mrs. Hale, we received a signed medical consent form authorizing Mr. Derek Hale to act on your behalf for future procedures." My breath caught. "That's impossible." I said each word, scraping my throat. She offered to email me a scanned copy. When I opened it, my stomach lurched. There it was, my name crooked and heavy, written in a way that mimicked but did not belong to me. Twist S14. Derek's handwriting had always betrayed him in its blunt, blocky lines. I pressed the phone against my ear until it hurt. "That is not my signature," I told her, calm but razor sharp. She paused, perhaps embarrassed, then assured me that the consent would be suspended pending verification. Still, the violation was real. They hadn't just taken my money, they had tried to take my autonomy, my voice, and decisions about my own body. The betrayal carved deeper than their shouted insults days earlier. Rage stirred under my skin, hot and electric, but I forced it back into the sheath of composure. When I went to church that Sunday, I felt the air shift around me. The same women who once hugged me now only offered thin smiles. A few leaned together, whispering, their eyes darting toward me, then away. At the grocery store later, I caught a phrase float past from Celine's friend near the deli counter, "Poor thing, she's losing her mind since the surgery. Twist S15. The words sank deeper than the whisper intended. My cheeks burned not from shame, but from the audacity. I had worked 40 years as a nurse, raised a daughter with steady hands, built a life of resilience. Now, because of Celine's venom, the neighborhood eyed me like a fragile relic to be pitied. I did not fight them with protests. I walked through those aisles silently, chin slightly higher, letting the rumors wash over me without breaking stride. If silence had been my shield before now, it became my strategy. At home, I began to record everything. I snapped photos of caller IDs when Celine ignored me, screenshotted texts from Derek dripping with false concern, saved voicemails where their tone turned sharper than they'd ever admit in public. I kept a logbook on my nightstand, each date and detail written in firm, legible lines. Evidence, not emotion, would become my answer. At night, when the house fell quiet and the ache in my knee pulsed in rhythm with my heart, I opened my locked drawer. Inside lay my will insurance forms and folders of personal records. I added the newest documents there, layering proof over proof like bricks in a wall. Sitting back, I placed my palm on the stack and whispered, "They want me voiceless. I will not vanish." The broken fob still sat on my dresser, its crack a daily reminder that security could fracture. But the key itself remained whole, and so did I. They might forge my name, spread whispers, and circle me with shadows, but my silence was not defeat. It was sharpening. By the time I closed the drawer and turned out the light, I knew this much: they thought forged signatures and whispered lies could erase me. But soon the truth would stand taller than every rumor they had planted. The hospital's evaluation room smelled faintly of antiseptic and paper. I sat on a straight-back chair, my cane leaning against my knee. The fluorescent lights above hummed, and every tick of the clock pressed deeper into my chest. Dr. Crane held a clipboard glasses sliding down the bridge of his nose as he made neat notes. He was a man of precise movements, his calm eyes measuring me more carefully than any machine could. My palms sweated as I folded them over one another. I knew why I was here. My own daughter had whispered lies to make me sound unfit, unstable, incapable of making my own decisions. 2 weeks ago, I had discovered Derek's forged consent form. Now Celine wanted the world to believe that her mother had lost her mind. And this room with its blank walls and too quiet air felt like a courtroom, where I might lose the last piece of myself that mattered. I adjusted the way I sat, straightening my back. My voice trembled only slightly when I answered his first questions: what day it was, who the president was, where I lived. I saw the quick flicker of approval in his eyes, and I seized it. Every word I gave was a defense against erasure. Every steady response was a lifeline. Inside, though, I was shaking. The thought haunted me: what if they succeeded? What if my signature, my voice, my very right to speak for myself, was stolen by my own blood? Dr. Crane set the clipboard down with a soft thud. He leaned forward, his tone professional, but warmer now. "Mrs. Hale, you are entirely competent. There is no indication of mental decline or instability. You are fully capable of managing your own affairs." The words landed like a gavel, firm and undeniable. My chest loosened. I hadn't realized how tightly I'd been holding my breath. For the first time in weeks, I felt air fill me fully. I swallowed hard and nodded, gripping the cane at my side until my knuckles whitened. "I would like copies," I said, my voice steady, sharper than I expected. He smiled faintly as if he knew the weight of that request. "Of course. We'll provide full documentation today." When he left the room, I allowed myself the smallest smile. Vindication wasn't loud. It was a document with my name on it, signed by a doctor, that said, "You are not broken." And I knew this piece of paper would matter more than all their whispers combined. That afternoon, the heat in Houston seemed thicker than usual. Cicadas sang as I walked slowly into Arthur's auto shop, the smell of grease and old tires hitting me with familiarity. Arthur had been our mechanic for years, a man with oil under his nails and a kindness he rarely put into words. He looked up from under a lifted hood when he saw me wiping his hands on a rag. "Marjorie," he said cautiously, almost guilty. "I was going to call you." I leaned on my cane, eyeing him carefully. "Then say it now." He sighed, lowering his eyes. "Derek came by. Said he needed me to sign a couple of things. Called them routine insurance and medical paperwork. He said you were recovering and couldn't be bothered. I signed one." My heart sank, though not with surprise. The puzzle pieces fit too neatly. "You knew it wasn't right," I whispered. Arthur's face tightened. I did. The signature didn't sit well with me, but he pressed hard. I didn't want trouble with your family. I'm sorry, Marjorie." I closed my eyes for a moment, steadying myself against the sting. Then I opened them, meeting his gaze. "Thank you for telling me. Can you write that down for me, your account of what happened?" He nodded, his voice low. "Yes, I owe you that much." I placed a hand briefly on his arm. It wasn't forgiveness yet, but it was acknowledgement. His guilt had become my evidence. Back at my home office corner, I spread the papers across the desk, the fresh report from Dr. Crane Arthur's short-signed statement, the photos of receipts, the forged consent form. Page by page, the folder grew heavier, thicker, undeniable. I slid each into plastic sleeves, labeling them carefully: medical competence, verified witness statement, Arthur. The lies they had spun were turning brittle, and in my hands the truth hardened into steel. As the sun slipped low, I touched the folder's cover. It felt warm, solid, like a shield I had forged out of my own survival. "They forged papers to erase me," I murmured to the stillness. "Now my own papers will bury their lies." I placed the folder into the locked drawer and turned the key. For the first time, the silence in the house didn't feel like defeat. It felt like patience. The war had shifted. The lies had cracked, but I knew Celine and Derek would not surrender. They would strike harder and soon. Vivian's kitchen smelled faintly of coffee and buttered toast, but my appetite had vanished. Papers covered the table. Dr. Crane's official evaluation, Arthur's signed statement, my highlighted bank records. James, my attorney, sat across from me, his suit jacket draped neatly over the chair. His pen tapped softly against the folder as he reviewed each document in silence. Finally, he looked up, his tone, measured but direct. "Mrs. Hale, you have choices now. You can press charges, you can initiate guardianship proceedings in reverse," or he paused, sliding a form toward me. "You can reclaim your home by lawful notice. No shouting, no spectacle, just law." I inhaled deeply. I didn't want a circus. I wanted boundaries. My hand trembled slightly as I set Dr. Crane's letter in front of him. "This is enough." James nodded. "This proves you're competent. They cannot erase that." The fear that had followed me like a shadow seemed to loosen its grip. I straightened in my chair, calm settling into my bones. Then we served the papers. Vivian brought the clipboard into the living room. The eviction paperwork sat neatly clipped, my name typed alongside theirs, waiting for my pen. My heart pounded with every word my eyes traced. For years I had avoided anything that looked like confrontation, hoping silence would mend what anger tore. But silence had only fed their audacity. My hand hovered before touching the pen. With one deliberate stroke, I signed where James indicated. My signature didn't shake. The sound of the pen scratching the page felt like a door shutting on years of avoidance. James added the certified deed copy into the envelope. "This stays with me. Proof of co-ownership. They can call it cruel, but it's the law." I exhaled a quiet relief, threading with conviction. Let's finish it. The sun was high when we arrived at Celine and Derek's West University Place home. I stood by the curb with my cane, refusing to step further. My knee throbbed, but the steadiness inside me carried more weight. The process server, a calm man in a navy vest, strode up the walkway and knocked. Within moments, the door swung open. Celine appeared, first her hair perfect, her expression collapsing into disbelief as the papers met her hand. "What is this?" She snapped, her voice shrill enough to echo. Derek appeared behind her jaw, clenched eyes narrowing as the server taped the duplicate notice to the front door. Twist S18, the paper was official. The timeline clear, 48 hours to respond or vacate. James stepped forward from the sidewalk, handing Derek a sealed envelope. "Legal notice deed copy attached, timeline included. You have options, but they're within the law." Their eyes darted past me. Neighbors' curtains shifted. A lawnmower fell silent down the block. Humiliation now sat squarely on their doorstep. Derek tore open the envelope, skimming quickly until his face drained. This isn't right. You promised the house was ours." His voice cracked between outrage and fear. "And James calmly unfolded the certified deed copy, tapping the second name on the page. Twist S19. My name printed clear as day alongside theirs. Selene's voice quivered with fury. This is cruelty, Mother. Pure cruelty. I tightened my grip on the cane and met her eyes evenly. It's ownership, not cruelty, and it is mine. The silence that followed was louder than her outburst. The only sound was the faint flutter of curtains returning to place. By late afternoon, back in Vivian's townhouse, my phone lit up with messages. Selene's words came first, accusations of betrayal, pleas laced with venom shifting into threats. Derek followed with talk of guardianship, declaring I wasn't thinking clearly. I didn't argue. I didn't reply. Each message I forwarded to James, labeled and stored. My discipline outlasted their fury. As night fell, I stacked the day's documents into my growing folder, slid it into the locked drawer, and turned the key. The house was quiet, the kind of quiet that didn't ache anymore. They finally see, I whispered, that the ground they stood on was mine all along. The folder felt heavier tonight, not with burden, but with certainty. By nightfall, their anger would take a darker turn, a knock at Vivian's door, and the wail of an ambulance I did not call. The evening was quiet, almost too quiet. Vivian and I sat at her kitchen table, steam curling up from our mugs of chamomile tea. My knee throbbed, but the silence had begun to feel like healing. The folder of documents rested by my elbow, my silent armor, though tonight I hadn't expected to need it. Then came the sound, first faint, then unmistakable. Sirens. Red and blue lights splashed across the blinds, painting the walls with chaos. A pounding rattled the front door. Houston Fire Department, a voice called. Vivian set her mug down with a sharp clink. My stomach turned cold. When she opened the door, 2 paramedics stood there, stretcher wheels rattling on the sidewalk. Behind them, a police cruiser idled. "Ma'am, we received a 911 call," one said, flipping his clipboard. Caller reported that Marjorie Hale was at risk of harming herself. "We need to check her immediately." My own name on his lips felt like a theft. My breath hitched. I never called. I never. But the lights outside drew neighbors to their porches. Their eyes followed the flickering red-blue across Vivian's doorframe. The stretcher's wheels screeched against the curb as the paramedics prepared it anyway. The hum of gossip was already stirring on the street. And then, right on cue, Selene's SUV pulled up. She stepped out with Derek at her side, their faces painted in feigned concern. "Oh, thank God you came," Selene told the officer loud enough for everyone within earshot. "She's been unstable since her surgery. We've been terrified she might hurt herself." My fury surged so hot I thought I might collapse under it. Derek crossed his arms, adding smoothly, "We've begged her to accept care, but she won't listen. Please, you have to do something before she does something to herself." The words dripped poison delivered with polished innocence. The neighbors' whispers swelled. I caught the phrase, "suicidal," floating in the night air. Vivian stepped between me and the uniformed men. "That's a lie," she snapped her nurse's badge, catching the light as she pulled it from her bag. "I've known this woman for decades. She's not unstable, and she certainly didn't call you tonight." The air thickened tension, crackling like static. I tightened my grip on the cane and felt humiliation claw at me, but beneath it, burned defiance. "Check my file," I said, my voice clear enough to cut through the murmurs. I pulled my folder from the table just inside the doorway and retrieved Dr. Crane's letter. My hands were steady as I handed it to the lead paramedic. "Read this. Out loud if you must." The man adjusted his glasses, scanning the page before speaking. "Patient is fully competent with no signs of mental instability or self-harm risk. Signed, Dr. Crane, M.D." Silence fell heavier than any siren. The neighbors shifted, some folding their arms, others looking towards Selene and Derek with new suspicion. Relief washed through me, cold but sharp, proof louder than rumor. The officer stepped closer, his flashlight beam lowering. "Mrs. Hale, do you feel unsafe tonight?" "No," I answered firmly. "Not until they showed up." He turned towards Selene and Derek. You understand, making a false report to emergency services is a crime. Derek's face drained of color. We only wanted to help, he stammered, eyes darting everywhere but at me. Selini's voice broke into a protest. She's twisting everything. You don't know what she's like at night, the things she says, but the officer raised a hand, silencing her. Unless you have credible evidence, you're wasting city resources. Consider this your warning. For once, I didn't need to say another word. My silence, bolstered by the letter in the paramedics' hands, spoke more powerfully than their rehearsed lies. Later, the lights faded from the street, the ambulance left empty, and Vivian closed the blinds. The neighbors retreated, the night reclaiming its stillness. I sat at the table again, my documents folder before me. Slowly, I returned Dr. Crane's letter to its place and locked the drawer shut. They tried to erase me with sirens, I whispered. They forgot I carry proof louder than lies. My chest rose with one deep breath, steeled not by anger but by resolve. Tonight had taught me that I could weather their staged humiliations without breaking. Tomorrow, I would no longer simply defend. The ambulance left empty, but I knew their next attack would not just target my sanity, it would aim straight at my legacy. The papers arrived in a stiff manila envelope dropped on Vivian's doormat, as if they were nothing more than junk mail. I bent to pick them up, my knee screaming in protest, and the seal split with a flick of my thumb. Harris County Probate Court petition for guardianship. I read my own daughter's name, Celine Crow petitioner, Derek Crow co-petitioner. Their claim mental incompetence due to post-surgical decline. The words blurred for a moment, my hands trembling, but not from weakness, only from betrayal so sharp it left me hollow. They hadn't stopped with lies to neighbors or false sirens. They wanted to take my very rights. I folded the papers back into the envelope and whispered, "So this is war." The courthouse smelled faintly of polished wood and old paper. I sat at the respondent's table, my cane angled against my leg, my folder of documents square in front of me. Celine and Derek entered like actors on stage, Derek's hand hovering at her back, Selena's face carefully schooled into piety. "Your Honor," their attorney began smoothly, "my clients seek only to protect Mrs. Hale. She is recovering from surgery in a fragile state and no longer capable of independent decision-making." Celine tilted her chin toward me, eyes glistening with crocodile tears. "We love her," she said softly, "but she needs help she refuses to accept." The judge, a woman with steel-gray hair and glasses that caught the light, looked at me but said nothing yet. I let their performance roll on the outrage tightening in my chest. When my turn came, I rose slowly, every ache in my body grounding me rather than weakening me. My voice was even. "Your Honor, I submit Dr. Crane's medical evaluation dated just last week." The bailiff carried the envelope forward. The judge skimmed the pages, lips pursed before reading aloud. "Patient is fully competent, demonstrates clear memory, judgment, and insight." The courtroom shifted, whispers, rustling like dry leaves. I sat calm while Celine's attorney cleared his throat, faltering for the first time. My silence said what I needed it to their script had crumbled. I wasn't finished. I slid another folder forward. "Additionally, Your Honor, I present bank statements and certified deeds in my name." The judge lifted her brows as the clerk delivered the stack. Line after line revealed accounts untouched by Celine or Derek, assets they had never known existed. A co-owned property deed dated years before bore only my signature and a long-forgotten partner's. Gasps filled the chamber. Derek's jaw dropped open. Celine's composure cracked. This can't be right," she stammered. "She told us she had nothing." I looked directly at her. "I told you what you wanted to hear. That doesn't make me dependent. It makes me private." The judge's gavel tapped once restoring order. By the time arguments wound down, the attorney's voice had lost its polish. The judge removed her glasses, folding them neatly on the bench. "I will reserve judgment," she said firmly. "But let me be clear. Guardianship is not a tool for control. Abuse of this process will not be tolerated in my court." The warning hung heavy, undeniable. I stood folder tucked firmly under my arm and walked from that courtroom on my own 2 feet, cane clicking steady on the marble floor. Each sound echoed like defiance. They had come to own me. Instead, they had exposed themselves. The courtroom was only a battleground, but the war for my legacy was far from over. The morning light filtered through the tall windows of Harris County Probate Court, glinting off the judge's glasses as he shuffled the written decision. My palms were damp, but I gripped my cane steady. For weeks, every step I'd taken had felt like an uphill climb against my own family. Today, I needed to breathe again. The judge's voice carried across the room. This court finds Marjorie Hale competent, financially independent, and not in need of guardianship. The petition is dismissed with prejudice. His eyes flicked toward Celine and Derek Stern now. Future attempts to mislead this court may be considered abuse of process. He set the papers down, hammering the words into permanence. I felt the breath I hadn't realized I'd been holding finally loosen, filling me whole. A temporary order followed. No one could authorize medical decisions in my name without my explicit written consent. I nodded silent. It wasn't victory I tasted, but freedom returning molecule by molecule. In the corridor outside, Celine's heels clicked angrily against the marble floor. She caught up to me, her voice pitched for sympathy she no longer owned. "You chose money over family," she said, eyes shining with rehearsed pain. I stopped, balanced by the cane, and looked her full in the face. No, I chose boundaries over harm. My voice was even not sharp, not pleading. I watched Derek shift uncomfortably beside her, staring down at his shoes, as if the floor itself offered cover. "I won't chase you," I continued, "but if you ever want family therapy with a neutral counselor, I'll come. On one condition, an apology and an acceptance of today's ruling." Celine opened her mouth, but no words came. I turned before silence swallowed us all. Later at Gulfstar Bank, I sat across from Donna Vu, the branch manager, her neat handwriting crisp against legal pads. The air smelled of polished wood and coffee. My folder lay open between us, filled with the documents that had carried me through storms. "Let's finalize your trust, Mrs. Hale," she said. One signature after another, I anchored my legacy, a revocable living trust to hold the house, a scholarship fund for nursing assistants at Houston Community College. People like I once was fighting for every dollar, every credential. A separate education trust for my grandchildren with an independent trustee. My voice, my choices set down in ink that no one could forge. I reissued my power of attorney and healthcare proxy, naming Vivian Hart. Donna slid a small fireproof key box across the desk. I felt its weight in my palm, heavier with promise than any jewelry. I gave one copy to Donna, another to James, my attorney. For once, the paper trail was not my prison, it was my shield. That afternoon, I walked slowly through the corridors of Houston Medical Center, Vivian by my side. The patient advocacy director shook my hand, welcoming me for volunteer orientation next week. The intake desk, the consultation rooms, the bulletin board covered in thank you cards all reminded me of why I had once loved my work. I tested my knee along the looping hallway, every step steady, unhurried. Not racing, not collapsing, just moving forward. By evening, we sat on Vivian's porch, 2 mugs of peppermint tea between us, cicadas, droning their hymn in the Texas twilight. We laughed softly about hospital parking traded recipes, spoke of ordinary things that carried extraordinary comfort. She didn't need to say it aloud, and neither did I. Chosen family is still family. My phone buzzed. A text lit the screen. My grandson, the one who had quietly checked on me during these months, wrote, "I'm proud of you, Grandma. Can I volunteer for your scholarship program?" I typed back, "You don't owe me. Just be decent." That's enough. Setting the phone down, I let the porch light glow wash over me. I was never looking for a victory. I was looking for my voice. I found it, and I intend to keep it. Looking back on everything I've endured, I realize one truth. Silence is not weakness. It can be the sharpest form of strength. I learned that setting boundaries is not abandoning family, but protecting dignity. For anyone listening, especially those who feel overlooked or silenced, remember you have a voice and you deserve to use it. No one can take that from you unless you hand it over. What about you? Have you ever had to stand up quietly but firmly against unfair treatment, even from those closest to you? Share your story below. If this video touched your heart, leave a 1 in the comments or let me know where you're watching from. And if you didn't connect with it, tell me why. I'd love to hear your perspective. If you believe in stories that carry lessons and hope, please subscribe to this channel so you don't miss the next one. Together, we can keep sharing voices that will not be erased.